Hi, welcome to my channel. I'll be showing you how to make this cropped knit vest using just your hands, no hooks or needles. It's a great beginner project and works up really fast. I made this vest using some special handmade yarn I'd been saving for a while for just the right project. I love the different colors and sizes that make up this wool roving and wanted to make a piece that really shows off the variations. Finger knitting was perfect for this because you use just your hands and no tools, so there are slight differences in stitch sizing. Finger knitting also uses relatively little yarn, which was great because I didn't have a lot to work with. For visual clarity, in this tutorial, I'll be recreating the vest using this t-shirt yarn, but you can work with any bulky yarn you'd like. To make a woman's small, US size 2/4, I used about 43 yards. You'll also need some scissors, safety pins, a tapestry needle, and a tape measure to take your measurements. I'll put information and links in the description. I'll give you a quick overview of the garment construction. This vest is made in two pieces, the front and the back, and then joined together at the straps and side seams, and it's worked from the bottom up. I made my top cropped, but you can make it any length you'd like. You just need to get the measurements around the fullest part of your bust and your desired length. My width is 32 inches, which since I'm making it in two halves would be 16 inches or roughly 41 centimeters for each side. And then the length is approximately 13 inches or 33 centimeters. I'll start with the front piece by making a slip knot. The way I do it is I make a crossover and then pull the yarn through the center and give it a little tug to tighten it slightly. If you leave your starting tails on each panel on the long side, you can use them to stitch up the sides later. Then you'll make a chain by pulling the long working end of your yarn through the loop. That's the first chain. You can identify them by these less than symbols. Continue chaining until you reach the desired width. Try to keep them approximately all the same size. For simplicity, I suggest making your chain an even number since you'll later be dividing this number in half to form the neckline. Mine is 16 inches and I made a total of 16 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. There's a loop coming out of the last chain. In the chain next to that one, carefully pull through the working yarn to make another similarly sized loop. And you just keep making loops into each chain until you get to the end of the row, taking care that they don't fall out as you move along your row. When you're done, you should have the same number of loops as chains, with one loop coming out of each chain. In my case, I've got 16. Then, leaving this first loop alone, pull up a loop into the second loop and into all the rest of the loops until you get to the end. You do that same process for each row. Start a new row by pulling up a loop into the second loop from the end and work all the way down. And you'll just repeat this for how many rows you need to get to your desired length, which is the measurement of where you want the bottom of your top to be to where you want the armhole to start. For my top, I pulled up loops for a total of 5 rows. So at this point, I'll work the rest of those rows and meet you back when I've finished. For the next step, you'll be taking in the sides of your top by making decreases, which will create your neckline. So in my example here, I'm starting with 16 stitches. It's the same number I had since the start of my project. To split my panel evenly, I take the number 16 and divide it in half, which gives me 8. My working yarn is on the left of my project, so I'll be starting on the left side and working with the first 8 loops of the row, and put a safety pin on the 8th loop. To decrease, put the 2 loops closest to the edge on your finger and bring the working yarn through both loops. That combines 2 into 1, and then continue as normal, pulling up just 1 loop through each stitch. Stop when you have 2 loops left, the one right before the safety pin and the one with the safety pin. Then do another decrease where you stitch the last 2 loops together. I removed the pin, which I just put on for the first row for easy counting. And as I count my stitches, you'll see I've reduced my 8 loops down to 6, since I decreased by 1 on each side. And you can see here how it starts bringing the neckline in, and I'll continue to decrease to form my strap. So for the next row, I decrease again at the edge, and I work regular stitches until I have 2 loops left. and I decrease at the last 2 loops, which brings my current loop count from 6 down to 4. Then I chose to stop decreasing at the armhole and just do a decrease at the neckline edge, so I worked a regular row where I skip the first loop and stitch into the second. When I get to the 3rd and 4th stitch, which are my last 2 stitches of that row, I decrease. That brings my stitch count from 4 to 3. For the next row, I decrease at the neckline and work the last stitch, giving me just 2 stitches left, which will be the width of my strap. Of course, you can modify this at any point to vary the amount of coverage and strap length by working more or fewer decreases. Now I'll start the strap, and I'll just make as many rows as I need until I reach the desired length. For my top, I made 4 more rows. Remember to skip the first loop of each row, so since I have only 2 loops, I'm only working 1 loop in each row. You can put a safety pin in the last 2 loops while you work the other side. Cut your yarn, leaving a tail you can sew in later. For the opposite side of your front panel, you'll mirror the steps you just completed. For me, I have the other remaining 8 stitches to work. The first stitch at the opposite edge of your work will be a decrease stitch. To join your new yarn, slip the working end through the first 2 stitches, leaving a tail, and then pull the working yarn through the loop. Give a tug to tighten. And now the 2 loops are joined into one. Continue working regular stitches until you get to the last 2, and then decrease. I went from 8 to 6 stitches. Continue to mirror the opposite half. For me, that was another row of decreases at each side, giving me 4 stitches. And then I only decrease at the neckline for the next row, so I stitch into the second and then decrease at the last 2, which brings 4 stitches down to 3. I'm back at the neckline edge, so I decrease there and work the last stitch, turning my 3 stitches into 2. Then it's time for the strap, so I make the same number of rows as I had on my other strap. For me, it's 4. At this point, you can see what the front and back of my work are looking like, and that they should be more or less symmetrical. Place a pin into the 2 loops and cut your yarn, leaving a tail. Now I'll start to work on the back panel. The bottom part where you'll start is worked exactly the same as the beginning front section that had no decreases. Then it comes in on each side, making this racerback style cut, and it's joined to the front straps. So to start, you'll do exactly what you did on the front. In my case, I chained 16 and pulled up loops for 5 rows. If you need to go back and see how that's done again, you can click on the chapter marked Starting the Front Panel. I'll meet you back here after I've completed that step. I just completed the base, and now I'll start to bring the work in on each side. I still have the same number of loops as my starting chain, which is 16, and I'll decrease 1 at each end, bringing my total down to 14. I decrease for a total of 5 rows, which will bring my stitch count down to 6. So continue to decrease until you reach your desired width, and I'll meet you back to show you the next step. I've decreased until my stitch count is at 6, and then I'm going to do 3 rows with no decreases until I've reached the top of my work where I'll join the straps. My front and back panels should then have the same number of rows. So I start with 6 loops in a row, and I'll continue to have 6 loops until I get all the way to the top. Continue working this step, and I'll meet you back when I'm done. Now I'm at the top of my work, and the next step is to join it to the straps. Lay your front panel out like this with the top side, the side with the V's facing up, and align the 2 loops to the 2 loops at the edge of your back piece. You'll join the straps to the back with slip stitches, and with your finger in the working loop, insert it into the strap loop. Wrap your working yarn over your finger and pull through both loops. Slip the next loop from the strap onto your finger, and then the next loop from your back panel. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. The first strap is now joined to the back, and the loops next to it will need to be cast off. In my case, I have 2, and the remaining 2 will be used to join the other strap. To cast off, slip stitch into each loop. Continue slip stitching until you reach the start of your strap. Then join the same way you did for the first strap with your finger through the working loop. And repeat for the next strap loop. To bind off, chain 1, cut your work leaving a tail, and pull through. And now the back neckline is complete. You can weave the tails in at this point or when you're all done, and then you'll sew the sides together. I'm going to quickly do it here using my finger because the yarn is so big, but you may want to use a tapestry needle depending on the size of your yarn. After sewing up the sides, I went around the bottom of my top with a round of slip stitches to give it a finished look. Doing this also shapes it slightly by bringing the edge in, which makes for a nicer fit. You can also add this finished edging to the armholes and neckline, but I chose not to because the yarn is so bulky. To make the slip stitch around the edges, start with a slip knot and slip your finger through the loop. I like to begin at the side seam, and then you'll work into each loop along the edge. From this perspective, when the work is upside down, it looks like the top of each loop. Insert your finger and pull the yarn through both loops. And then repeat all the way around until you're back where you started. And once you're back at the beginning, work into that first stitch and cut your work, pulling the tail through to bind off. And this is what the edging looks like when it's finished. Then you weave your tails in, and the vest is complete. One other thing worth noting is that if you happen to be using wool roving like I am, I recommend pairing this vest with something silky like this satiny shirt, because as nice and as fluffy as this yarn is, if it's exposed to friction and rubbing, like under your arms, it will ball up and pill. So wearing it against slippery fabrics is ideal. If you ended up making this project, I'd love to see how it turned out and what kind of yarn you used and any other personalized touches you might have made. Feel free to tag me at Noodleweaver on social media. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this project, check out some of my others and subscribe if you'd like to stay up to date on new videos as they come out. Thanks for watching. See you next time.